Okay. So just kind of know is that like I have this Jupyter notebook. I'll share the link to how to find this too. It's actually on the repo where I keep all my lessons. So my cohort kind of knows. So a preface to this. I'm not an expert, right? I'm not a career coach. I'm not someone who like, act like sees hundreds of people all the time trying to get them a job. And there are other resources. So obviously take like what I'm going to say, like with a grain of salt and like, determine like, like what advice you think is relevant. And, use that, when you're talking, especially here at Flatiron, you have a career coach and everything. So there's some other resources that you should be aware of, right? So one is like, we're at Flatiron, which is really nice. Like I got to tell you is that probably the hardest thing about like, not just learning data science or getting into data science, is really just like having someone to talk to and being like, hey, like, so what does this look like in the field and stuff like that? And career coach is actually a really great place to go to. And also know that you also have your cohort mates and stuff like that. You essentially already have people you can talk to, beyond like, like your just individual friends and stuff. So that's really nice. I would point out that like, I think it's every Thursday for my cohort, you guys probably saw there, I mentioned this, at 11:30 to 12 Eastern time, there's a career service AMA. So if you didn't know that already, like definitely try to attend that because literally ask me anything is probably a pretty good deal you have. And what's nice is that like we do the here at Flatiron really try to get you like a big goal of us is not just like getting you through the material, but also like getting you a job. Like that's a big part of like what our goal is. So we really do try to give you guys resources as you need to. For people who don't have career services or a career coach yet, which is like my cohort, you'll get that about 5 weeks prior to graduation. Graduation, you'll be assigned a career coach, and they'll actually work with you beyond graduating too, at actually getting your job. So something to look forward to. This is probably like the 5th time I've talked about this to my cohort. Is this Build a Career in Data Science book? It's at bestbook.cool. They also have a podcast. It is like, I would say like it came out, I published it like last year, but the students have read it and like who've used it, they're like, this is actually really great. And I think it's a really great resource, not just for like finding a job, getting into a career, but also like beyond that, kind of seeing like, what does that look like once you kind of once you get going into your career, like, what should you kind of focus on? There's one section that's like how to leave your job gracefully, which I think is kind of like a really nice kind of touch to it. So there's a lot of information. They also have a podcast, podcast.book.cool or bestbook.cool. I'll just show you a little bit like here. My cohort already knows this because we had a little assignment on it. And hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I think the authors really do a great job. And they also, if you haven't seen it, to order the book, they got a little coupon code, so you can get 40% off. This is not like an affiliated like link or something like that. I should start doing that, I feel like, just because like, I recommend it so many times. But anyway, all right. So 2 resources, you have Flatiron overall. And of course, this Build a Career in Data Science book. I think it's really great. And again, I'm not an expert, so take everything I have with a grain of salt and you can decide, what makes the most sense and maybe add on to it. All right. So step 0 is practice your skills, right? Like practice your data science skills. Like no amount of networking, no amount of like, trying to get involved in community, that's not the thing that's going to get you the job. Like it might get you to talking about getting a job with someone, but like in the end, like that's something that's going to keep the job. So like it's important that you really do like practice and actually make an effort on honing your data science skills. And like I like to think of things like sometimes people think of like building up this brand, and we'll kind of talk about like online brand, which for me when I say it, I still kind of cringe at the sound of like online brand, online presence. It just feels off to me. But when we talk about a brand, really it's about like saying, hey, when you practice your skills, you start having things to show for it. Like your brand in a lot of ways is like evidence of who you are, who you are professionally. So something kind of works. So this is the very first step, right? But assuming you have your first step, like, okay, I'm practicing my skills, maybe you're halfway through the course, maybe you guys are graduated, like some people here. What kind of goes next? Well, next one is probably networking. And I don't know about you all, but like for me, I'm actually more on the socially anxious side. I don't know how people feel about like this. I don't know about this. Also, like it's like or mid COVID, so like seeing handshakes kind of like did a little trigger, like oh, shaking hands, oh craziness going on here. But in the future, right? Like I think sometimes people think of networking. Like I literally search like networking images, and it was like one of the first images that pulled up, and like that's kind of usually what people is. I don't know what this guy's doing, like clapping his hands because they're shaking hands. I don't know. Maybe that's something exciting, but that's kind of like usually what people think about networking. But like, what really is networking? another example of like exchanging business cards, which I don't know. This is, if anyone's ever given me a business card, I've never kept it more than a month. um, but sometimes in my head, like when I hear networking, and depending on your background, networking to me sounds like a dirty word. It's like, oh, like networking, those business people with their networking, like in their face, like their fake, like attitudes and stuff like that. But really what networking is about just making a human connection. And like one thing I'll say is like, there's a bunch of ways you can make human connections, even in like COVID quarantine world. You'd be surprised. But one thing you should kind of know is that usually people talk about networking. LinkedIn is kind of like a classic where people kind of talk about like, oh, you have to be on LinkedIn. And I would say at this point, it's like, you have to have a LinkedIn. Like, I don't know any, like if anyone doesn't have a LinkedIn, like in applying for a job, it's just going to look more suspicious than anything. So it's something just to create something like, essentially it's a way to show that like, oh, you exist kind of deal. We'll talk a little bit note on LinkedIn too. But note that you can also like network through other mediums. So, post COVID, when you guys are going to like conferences and stuff like that, obviously you're going to talk to people you work with, all that stuff. So there's other mediums, including like maybe even other online communities. Just kind of know like LinkedIn is a requirement, but like not the only thing to like network. Okay, cool. So why should we network? Like this is kind of like, I was like, who, what, where, why, right? But why? It's like basically one thing I like to say is that like I've been reflecting this over the past few days just because I was kind of making this up, and I'm like, I literally have never had a job that I had not at least talked to someone first before applying and getting that job. Anytime I've ever like put my resume in first and getting an interview, this is me personally, I've never gotten that job. So obviously I'm biased towards this because that's how I've like literally have gotten every job. And that could either be like, I knew someone who was working at the company that I wanted to work at. It was a few times that people reached out to me on LinkedIn, but usually it involved me talking with someone before actually applying. And I think that's kind of an important aspect because I think that's what, if you talk to people, generally that's what you'll see. And at least that's from my experience. So that's kind of the importance. So like, how do you actually like reach out to people? Like say, what does that look like? So there's a kind of like 3 bars here. I think like the easiest one are like friends you already know, like people you already know with, and like if they had a job that was perfect for you, they would have already told you, right? That's kind of like the easy stuff. The medium kind of thing, it's like people you sort of know, right? So we all kind of really want to help one another out. I think that's something you'll see a lot of. So people like you might sort of know are people from, for example, I think you might know your cohorts more over time, but maybe from other cohorts, other Flatiron people, all that stuff, right? So like kind of saying like the people you kind of know, but like maybe a little acquaintance. Like I think this has happened to me like a few times. I've reached out to people who, like this actually happened to me recently. I reached out to someone who was like, I haven't talked to like for the past 6 years, but we had a good relationship, like, just kind of like chatting. And we were just kind of talking about, and we were talking about like job opportunities and stuff like that. And it was just kind of an interesting like talk, but it was kind of interesting because like, oh, it's people I kind of know, but like I wouldn't consider like close friends or something like that. That's kind of like the medium stuff that I think people are a little more comfortable. The hardest part is probably reaching out to people you don't know, and like but desired. I think that's desired and the one that can expand our heart. Yeah. So this is like kind of like the thing that like when people talk about networking, this is what people are talking about usually. It's people you don't know, you met once, or you're reaching out specifically because you're trying to reach out to that person because you say, oh, this person could be, this person's relationship could have value to me, right? And which sounds kind of selfish, but like it really is like that's kind of what the whole point of networking is. But really it's the one that can expand our horizons and basically someone beyond. So like most people here at Flatiron probably don't really know too many people outside of the Flatiron circle who are in data science. Like, maybe you do, but in general, a lot of people are like, I'm switching over from a different, career. This is kind of like, I have a few people come from academia who's like, I don't know anyone in data science right now, or maybe I have a couple people, but not really people I can ask. That's kind of the most desirable thing. So what do you do? Like, how do you reach out to people? So this is like me very basically kind of going through. And the first thing is, I put a little aside here, like I'm selfishly doing this for myself, partly because I love hearing from other people and like, people reaching on LinkedIn. But man, sometimes I get just LinkedIn like connections, and I'm a little more like, I don't just accept everything. I kind of like, oh, let me just wait a while. I was like, oh, do I want to accept them? Nah, decline. But like what I usually tell people is, one is that if I see you're from a Flatiron student, I'm usually like, okay, they didn't send me a message or anything, but I see they're a Flatiron student, I'll usually accept their like connection on LinkedIn and then just message them, say, hey, I saw you're a Flatiron student, that's awesome. And, usually chat a little bit because I think at the very least, it's like having a little connection. So I'm kind of purposely doing this thing. Hey, don't just like blindly connect with people on LinkedIn because I don't want people to get that in the habit of that. So spread the word. But again, this is the most hardest thing to do, like reaching out to people you don't know. So the first thing I say to people is like, find people who you want to be in the future. Like you can imagine like, oh, like in 3 to 5 years, I want to be that person. Like I want to have, like you look at someone on LinkedIn, like, wow, this is the person that I want to be. Like that's the role I want to be in like 3 to 5 years. Reach out to that person and say, hey, like, I'll kind of go through a little bit like reaching out, but it's like, hey, like I saw your profile here, like I saw you work from this company, I'm a data science student. I'd really love to like see, or like talk to you more and stuff like this, or like, kind of get an idea of like what you do. And you'd be surprised how many people are really receptive of that. If you're being genuine, I think most people are perfectly happy to like say, yeah, let's chat a little bit. Or like, oh, here, I'm kind of busy right now, but maybe talk to this person. Or, oh, what, if you're interested in our company, maybe you should talk about this. And again, going back to that, like building a career in data science book, they talk about a whole about getting that referral and stuff. And you'd be surprised how many people are just really like, yeah, I'll give you a referral. Partly because there's kind of a monetary incentive too. If you refer someone in a company and they get hired, usually get like a little bonus. So there's kind of like incentive there too. But I kind of put this little bullet point, reach out to people, like maybe in a conference or seeing them in something. So like, I wouldn't just like search data scientists, and just like find everyone who's a data scientist and start, asking for connections. That's not really like the whole point of networking. It's really about making that human connection. And so one way, obviously this is kind of, it's weird to talk about this in COVID, but like this will apply eventually. And even like their online conferences is, for example, if you see someone do a talk at a conference, and you're like, wow, that was really interesting. Or like, this person, sounds like something that I'm interested in, or, I'd like to get to know this person more, or their company. Like reach out to them and say, oh, I saw you on this conference, or like, for example, if you see something like in a book or something, or maybe you see them, they've done a blog post or whatever, like reaching out to, hey, I saw your blog post, I thought this was really interesting, I'd love to chat more, just thought I'd put in a connection. It's like that simple. And what's nice is that LinkedIn kind of forces you to, if you ever do a connection, you can like add a little message. It forces you, like, I can't remember how many characters, but it's like so many characters that you can fit. And that's kind of it. So it kind of makes it kind of nice and short. Some things I've seen, like, that I suggest to people to write out, say like, I'm a student, I recently graduated, I'm getting it, like I'm switching into the field of data science, or, I'm getting into data science. I'm interested in your role in a company. This is kind of like, feels very generic. Don't send this. I think this sounds very like too like vague, but add on to this. Like, hey, I'm interested in this company because of this going on here. Like, I actually would really like to like chat to learn more about, what you do there. Like, would it be cool to do that? This would usually, like during non-COVID times, I'd say, grab a coffee. Like that's kind of like, that's like code for being like in the tech world of being like, oh, let's grab a coffee, is basically let's network essentially. Mm-hmm. So one thing I will say too is that I've definitely had one particular student who did this specifically. Like they just were like reaching out, like, hey, like I just want to kind of see a little bit what's out there. And they reached out in this way. Basically, I'm a student, like I'm graduating from this data science program. I'd love to kind of chat a little bit like what you do. And they, did a little Zoom call. This was during COVID. And that actually led to a job for them. So they actually ended up like, the person's like, you're great. Like, hey, like apply to this thing and, I'll refer you. And they actually got their job from there. And they weren't even looking for a job. Like, it was just like, oh, like they were just kind of like, oh, I just should do this like networking thing. So you'd be surprised like what can work out for you. And I kind of put this little image here just to kind of remind you that like people really do want to help you out. Like, I think, especially in the data science world, for the most part, people come from so many different backgrounds that people are very open to be like, yes, like, let me help you. Let me help raise you up a little bit. And just kind of, pay it forward essentially. So yeah, cool. I can't see everyone at once, so hopefully that sounds good. Any questions about that? Cool. Yeah. So anyway, like I said, like just add a little personal touch when you like connect with someone, especially like through LinkedIn, and then chat with them and go through there. There's a whole bunch of like resources you can probably like search, like how to network or something, but I don't know. Sometimes those sound very like, again, the networking phrase just rubs me the wrong way. It sounds very impersonal, but really it's a personal part. Okay, so let me go to this next section, being part of a data science community. So this is where I put like in-person conference meetups, which are basically obsolete at this point right now in COVID. But there are some, like, first of all, there are some online like meetups and conferences and stuff like that. And I think that's something you could do some very similar stuff. But I kind of put this in here because I'm like, those are kind of like forced, like a conference is like the expectation is that you're going to talk to people and there's going to be a little bit of exchange of like, hey, I don't really know you, but you sound interesting. Like, can we like maybe connect some other time? Maybe you can tell me about your company, maybe put in a good word for me. It's a great way to meet people and stuff like that. When it's online, it's a little bit more effort because it's not like I said, when you're in person, you kind of have the physical space, like just like force you to be uncomfortable a little bit, essentially, like, oh, it's okay, this is happening, versus online takes a little extra step where you have to message someone or take an effort. But just kind of know that that's the classic way of kind of like networking or being part of a community. And what's cool is that as you go to more conferences, you tend to see the same people over and over again, or like some of the same people. So it kind of becomes a little like nice little close-knit community. Online communities. So this is where, like, during COVID, hey, everyone's online. So a classic one, like I would say, like social media platforms. So I put Twitter here particularly because like I would say, like, there's things like Facebook, there's things like, I guess technically I've heard people talk about Instagram. I don't have an Instagram. I don't have a Facebook either, but like, it's like, I don't really have reach out, but like Twitter, I got to say, it's pretty good in data science, at least from my experience. The way I kind of explain Twitter for like your data science stuff is like, go find like people that you would like to hear about professionally. So like, hey, like I like this person, I read this person's book, or I've seen a couple talks that they've done, like online, maybe it's recorded, or I hear really good things about this person. Like, let me follow them and just hear a little bit what they have. And I think they, talk about like the little data science Twitter. I think people are pretty like open and involved. Now, there are other communities too, online communities that are also data science, machine learning, and I'd say maybe not so much like friendliness and stuff like that. Classic of this is that usually the subreddits like machine learning is a little maybe not as friendly. Like they're not bad. It's just that I don't think they're as like open, like kind of like very like, oh yes, here we talk. In fact, usually people I personally follow on data science Twitter are like usually not very big fans of like the subreddit data science and the subreddit machine learning. So you just got to kind of find out what you will listen to. Now, one thing I would consider doing is like, if you already have a Twitter profile, like you can always do stuff. I purposely limit how many people I follow because I don't want to hear everything. I want to hear from some people. And so I actually like limit my following to like 75 people, which might be more extreme, compared to like how many people you can follow. But I would say consider limiting like who do you actually want to hear from. And like, you don't need to follow your mom. You don't have to follow like, like your brother just because like, it was like, oh, they're my relative and stuff like that. It's like, no, you can think of your Twitter as being like I'm just hearing what professionally is out there, and you can get part of that conversation, which is kind of nice. If you're reaching out and stuff like this doesn't just apply to Twitter. I don't know, actually, I should have put this like way above. It's just be genuine. Like, don't try to like, I would say if you try to make yourself like, I don't know, someone bigger on Twitter, or like, oh, I want to show that I'm a really great data scientist on Twitter, like, it's probably not going to be as fruitful. Usually what is like being genuine, like things that you actually want to share and how to talk about, that's usually pretty good. There's actually a great like little interview in the Build a Career Data Science book. I should like get like little kickbacks from them or something. I keep like talking about, but like there's actually a really great little interview in there, and one of the data scientists, not the author, but a data scientist they're interviewing, talks about when they were first starting off, they were like trying to put like, like 5 posts every day, on Twitter about data science, like retweeting things, and they just found it was exhausting, and they found out like it didn't really do anything, and they kind of stepped back and just kind of, just being themselves, and they found that was actually a lot, first of all, freeing, but also like really useful, and just like, saying, oh, this is kind of like ends up being a little bit like their brand of being like, oh, that's just who they are, like this is who they are, this is what they're sharing. So yeah, I have a little example of a resume here of being yourself. You guys may have seen this before, but if you haven't yet, it's pretty good. It's a My Little Pony resume. Has anyone seen this before? Like, give me a thumbs up if you have. No? Oh man. So this was actually a computer scientist. So like obviously this is a little more extreme. Like, like this is the literal resume that they had, but it adds a little personality. Like you're kind of like, I know who this person is. I won't recommend you do your resume like this or something like this. But I think the important part is like showing out, like, hey, like, like this is kind of like how I could talk about things. Like if you found something interesting that you did, you can share that out on like different social medias and stuff like that. And again, like your brand is really just talking about yourself. That's really what it's going to be about. So anyway, I just thought this was a really great example. This person, for the record, I know they talked about this resume because it was just going wild a few years ago. They did get a job through this resume. Like they did use this resume to get a job, which kind of says a little bit about like the resume. It's like, it's not necessary to have, well, we'll talk about resumes in a little bit, but you don't have to have the perfect resume, but also I wouldn't go that extreme personally. But anyway. Okay, so Twitter, Kaggle. So thumbs up if you've heard about Kaggle before. Yeah, I think I've talked about it in my course, so people have it. So Kaggle is kind of like a data science community. It's most known for competitions because you can like win like real money and like prizes and stuff like this. So it's kind of useful to kind of talk about a little bit what Kaggle is. So I'm just going to show you guys quickly what Kaggle looks like. So this is my Kaggle guy. But you can see a little bit like you have like a little bit of a news feed. You can see essentially they have things like competitions. So these are competitions that people like basically try to build usually predictive learning and trying to, what's it called? Do the best prediction possible. So you can actually sign up for these competitions. In fact, you can win like real money and stuff like this. It can be pretty competitive though. There's also though, that's what it's most known for, but there's also like data sets. So there's actually a lot of public data that people will actually put together, and you can see these little votes. People can vote, say, hey, like this data set was really good, or really well done. So for example, let's just click like temperature change here. And you can see a little bit like it has the data and actually implement like document it a little bit, and you can download this, for example, or like you just create a new notebook from Kaggle and stuff like that. So there's some pretty great stuff, and this is all made by users on Kaggle. So this is kind of like a social network for, I don't even call it a social network for data scientists, but it's a way data scientists can kind of provide stuff. There's also notebooks. You can actually create notebooks as well. I know a couple of students have already checked these out before. So you can see here, for example, like someone made a little notebook and did exploration, maybe EDA or maybe predictive modeling. So it's kind of a great thing to look through. And then there's also communities, which it's kind of cool. It's basically, what's it called? Like people can ask questions and stuff. So you can see there's actually kind of categories now too. So for example, if you say like, beginner, there's actually a lot of like questions that are like marked as beginner, and you can kind of see what people are asking, people sharing information. So it's kind of cool thing you can do. I'd suggest though, if you're doing a Kaggle, like, and I put this on now, this is like what a profile looks like. There's kind of like this little like ranking stuff going on here. So what's happening is there's this progression system in Kaggle, which basically kind of like ranks you as like either novice, contributor, expert, master, grandmaster. And just depending on like what you've achieved will put you in different ranking. I will tell you, if you're trying to get involved in the Kaggle community, even just like casually, like at least get to contributor and like, oh, how do I get to this point? Because everyone by default is a novice. Novices don't like provide any like, how do I say this? If a novice votes for something, it doesn't really matter. Like it doesn't count towards the progression system, which some people care about. So I do notice is that if you want to get kind of like interaction more, just to kind of like say, oh, I'm not just someone who just joined just yesterday and we actually care about being part of the conversation, at least get yourself to a contributor. Like, how do I do that? Well, it's actually really easy. You basically can just like do things like add your profile, add your location. You can probably pick your location if you don't want to share it, but like you just give it a little bit extra information, try and do a couple things, and then you become a contributor, and you can see all these little check boxes. I'm a contributor at least, and then people are just going to pay attention to you more. To get higher levels, for example, like an expert, like this is like basically you doing things and then people like validating like what you've done with like votes, and that's basically given like with medals. Like for data sets, notebooks, in discussions, if people vote up your stuff up, you'll get like a medal, bronze, silver, or gold, depending how many votes you get. Competitions is the one that's different, is that it just depends how well you rank across other people. But sometimes people will start focusing on like really trying to get like expert and master, which I think is like really interesting, because it's like that's not the point of like a online community for like your jobs. Like if you're trying to like network, trying to build your brand up, don't worry about trying to get like upvotes and stuff like this, or like trying to get this like higher ranking. this is actually a really great a little discussion. And the reason I put this out is just because I was part of this discussion, and like someone was asking like, hey, like I really want to get like more my notebooks like presented and stuff like this, like actually people paying attention to my notebook. How do I do this? And like one of my responses like from here is like, hey, like don't do this. Like don't try to make a like get your notebook noticed more. Just do good things and people will notice it. And I think that's pretty true. And like you can see, like in this case, like only like seven people upvoted this kind of deal, which is like not a huge amount, but like I think a lot of people like, yeah, that's really true. So I just want to kind of point this out because sometimes you can get into this mode of like, hey, how do I like promote my stuff to make myself look good? And like, don't worry about looking good. Just do stuff that is gonna like that you are going to enjoy, things that you think that would be worth sharing, and people will like, care about it or not care about it. But at the end, you're going to like learn stuff. And by the more you learn, the better you become, the more likely you actually get like noticed and stuff like that, if that makes sense. So I just tell people like be careful about trying to chase something that just trying to get a better standing, like a better like be better, like a better brand, where like really just do stuff and show you what you have, and that will build up your brand. Does someone unmute have a question or a comment?
We invite women leaders who are successfully architecting their careers.
All right, I think someone muted themselves or unmuted themselves by accident. If not, unmute yourself and ask your question. Okay. Like I said, at least be like a contributor in Kaggle. Cool. Makes sense. Any questions on that Kaggle stuff? No? Okay. Build your portfolio brand. So this is where I keep saying brand. Again, I struggle saying brand because it feels very like, I don't know, I'm very like not big on advertisements and stuff like this. And brand sounds a weird thing in my head. But know that basically like your brand is just saying like, what is you, like when someone searches for you, what do they find? Like if they do a Google search on like, Victor Geislinger, what do they find? And in the case of like, whatever they find, it's like, oh, like that's kind of like your brand. That's kind of like your first impression. I would say is that unless you're like really high up there and like kind of like famous essentially in the data science community, like your brand's not really going to mean a huge amount, but it's going to be that other thing. It's going to be that thing like that first impression. Like it's not going to be the one thing that's going to get you a job, but when someone's considering you to get a job and searches for you, like, oh, this person's written blogs, this person's been doing projects, the stuff you've been already doing here at Flatiron. I kind of point out is that like you can kind of think of like your brand, especially in data science, it's like really part of data science. So like you can think of like the stuff you've been doing, like the notebooks, and like this is like your math and code practice, statistics, all that stuff. That's kind of like your technical side. And I've already talked about this with my cohort before, but if you haven't heard it before, you can kind of think of a data scientist like this very classic like diagram. I should probably have found it, but you have something like someone who's really good at math, like math, statistics, calculus, right? And then you have coding like Python and stuff like this, scikit-learn. And then you have communication, and then all three of those together create a data scientist. Your non-technical communication, which is something you can basically do online, right? Like participate in conversations, sharing things out, those show like blogs, those are showing your communication side, which might not be as easy to like assess someone like when they're looking for a job. Like in the job, they're usually just finding someone's like, oh, can they do this practice? And they can kind of like give you kind of an assignment, kind of figure that out. But communication is a little bit harder to like judge for sure because it's how well do they communicate. So if you show you're active in a community, it does kind of show like, hey, here's evidence that someone is communicating. Again, I've known plenty of data scientists who have gotten jobs, not in Flatiron because we do ask you guys to make projects and blogs, but I have known other people who, don't write blogs and they've become data scientists and stuff. It's not a requirement, but it's just going to help you. One thing I put in here is like your elevator pitch. Has anyone heard of elevator pitch before? Like it's not just data science, right? So cool. I see some nods and stuff like that. So an elevator pitch, if you don't know, is kind of like a very quick, like sentence, 2 sentence. Like you can imagine like a minute and a half. Like someone says, hey, oh, like nice to meet you. Like, oh, tell me about yourself. And that's kind of like your elevator pitch is like what you say. The reason why it's called an elevator pitch is because the idea is that you can pitch yourself within like within the elevator ride. Like by the time the elevator, gets to the floor, you're like done with your pitch. This is kind of part of your brand. It's like really think about like who you are, like like essentially say like, where have you come from? You know, what experience have you already had, and like what you're looking for. And that's really what your elevator pitch is. I'm not going to go into the full details because we could talk a whole thing like this, but this is something you can talk about with your career coach. There's plenty of stuff online too that you could probably find, like, you know, how to develop your elevator pitch. But remember, the biggest thing is not trying to like make the perfect like thing that's going to get you the job and say, wow, like they talked to me for a minute, it's hired immediately. The idea here is really just trying to figure out like having that communication. So when you do talk to someone knows a little bit about who you are and kind of know what your goals are and can maybe help you out too. Okay. Sound pretty good. All right. Hopefully some of this stuff you guys already know from like other careers too. So it's for the record. All right. So special note on LinkedIn, because everyone knows about like what's up with this LinkedIn thing. So basically at this point, like I would say like LinkedIn is a requirement. Like I don't have a Facebook, like whatever, right? Like no one really cares that much. You know, other than like people trying to find me on Facebook and I can't find me. LinkedIn, I would say, is pretty much a requirement. Like at this stage, there might be some people out there who are getting like jobs as data scientists without LinkedIn, but it's like they already have like recognition. So I'd say at this point it's a requirement. So the important part is like, you know, I hope I'm not going to go through what LinkedIn is. I hope you guys understand a little bit, but what goes on your profile. So the way I kind of explain LinkedIn, it's kind of like your resume, which I'll talk about in a second, just for briefly, but your resume is kind of like usually about a 1-page paper. Like some people might say it's okay to do 2 pages, but I would really say at this level, 1-page paper, which means you're not fitting a huge amount of information on it. Your LinkedIn is kind of like someone looks at your resume and wants to know more about you. They go to your LinkedIn. So like you put your full education part, like where you've gotten schooling from, you know, whether you got a bachelor's, master's, maybe in a PhD. You probably don't have to worry about your high school putting on there, but you could put it in there if you want. Your work experience. So like in your resume, I usually say it's like your resume should have like your work experience and then like 2, maybe 3 bullet points of like things that you've achieved, or, you know, what your kind of like what your what's like your role was, what did you do in that job. Here you can put a lot more bullet points. Like you can put a lot more in there because you can kind of like filter it out. You can kind of imagine is that your resume is kind of like a summed down version of your LinkedIn. Things that you can put there too are example projects and stuff. So actually putting like your example projects, putting them directly on LinkedIn, because some people will just look on LinkedIn and they'll see, hey, here's some projects you've done. Also skills. I did want to put in skills in there because this is debatable. Some people will put every single possible skill they've ever had, like, well, not just on LinkedIn, but on their resume. On your resume, you really want to fine tune it so it's not like a huge blob. In LinkedIn, it can go either way. You can go with like, I'm going to put down every skill I have. Like I know how to use Microsoft Word. You can put that as a skill. I personally, when I see people who have a lot of skills down in their LinkedIn profile, I'm kind of just like, I don't really like, are they just putting a bunch of skills for the sake of putting skills? But I also notice that I do that too, because sometimes people will search for your, like, you know, if they search for your profile and they're looking for like a specific skill and you didn't list it, they might say, oh, well, they don't even have that listed. So I don't know, play around with it. This is where I was going to show you guys an example. It's not like the best LinkedIn profile or anything like that. I want to make that really clear. But hopefully you can kind of see I got a network thing and request, and I haven't looked at it yet. But this is kind of the idea of what you'd see. So you can see here, I got my name that's kind of already given. One thing you can also put there that's been recent is that you can, what's it called? You can put down how your name is said, which can be kind of useful. That's also, research has showed a little bit that's actually more beneficial, because if people can pronounce your name, like, you know, like I don't say you should change your name, but like if your name could be troublesome to pronounce, like no one pronounces my name the first time, Geislinger, because of these first 3 letters. But like it can kind of help a little bit. So you can put that in there. I have a little like, you know, information here, data science with a background in physics and mathematics. Boom, right? Like that's pretty straightforward. Don't put your whole life story, like this little headline area. I put my location because then that get, like, nowadays things are a little bit open to remote, but people get an idea of like where you are versus like, you know, if you're like in Boston, you're trying to apply somewhere like in New York, you know, that might kind of like say, are they trying to move to New York? You know, like, I don't know. So just kind of, it's kind of optional information, but does help. You can see there's extra stuff here, like you can feature stuff and all this stuff. kind of just ignore this thing. You can see activities. You can see like things I've like commented and said and stuff like this. This is what other people can see as well. So you can kind of see like, oh, are people being active on here and stuff like this. And then you can see like my experience. You can see like data science instructor, which is what I'm doing right now. You can see a little bit of like, I haven't really updated this in a while too, but like software developer and consultant, data science mentor. And you can see here, like I have like a few bullet points. I even have this extra part, but you could even put more information if you really wanted to. So that's kind of the idea here. And then your education, you can put like just your education of like what you've learned already and stuff like that. And you can kind of put this down like, maybe about the program itself, especially if it's not very obvious it's data science related. It can be important just to say, hey, like, like if you can kind of like focus on a part of like what this might be related. For example, maybe it's closer to business. Maybe it's closer to like you were doing some programming. Maybe it's more kind of math related, science related. And I don't think you'd have to worry too much. And then the last thing is, which I didn't put on here, is your, not last part, but license and certifications. So if you've done like other like courses and stuff like beyond like Flatiron, so like when you graduate Flatiron, I'd probably put this here. But for example, I had like, Udacity, I did this last year, like doing data engineering. Like it doesn't hurt to put down these credentials to say, hey, like I've taken something that was like that has improved my skills. Like that's a good thing to kind of put down here. But I wouldn't put down every single like little free course that took like an afternoon. Like AWS, you can take a bunch of certifications, stuff like that. Put the things that really matter and that you think would be important. Volunteer experience is very similar to your work experience. And then this is the skill assessment stuff. So this right here is, you can kind of list down your skills, and you can see here, these are my set of skills, but I've literally had people like, I can scroll, like scroll for a while and they have every single skill. So just kind of be aware, like don't try to put things down here. This is also a great place, like for you all, like you guys all know each other, like as in cohorts in Flatiron, like you can actually go here and like endorse people by basically saying, oh yes, I know, like I know Victor knows machine learning, like, plus this one. You can see someone here went through and this, I think literally just went through all of them, just clicked one, like endorse. You don't have to do that, but like I would say the main ones, especially the ones you can kind of emphasize, like things like, oh, things that people would care about. Data science, machine learning, maybe analytics, Python, like those are the kind of things you can do. LinkedIn also can do this thing. You can take an assessment on like a skill and stuff like that. I don't know. I don't know if it's relevant or not. I haven't heard anyone really say anything bad or good about it, but if you want to, you can. But they're usually really easy questions too. Like if you actually know the material, you can pretty much answer these things. Like unless you're JavaScript, JSON, like I'm not someone who like knows every single detail of like what you can do with JSON, but like it's JSON. It's not really that hard. Git, like again, I'm not a Git master, but I know enough about Git that I can answer most of these things that like in like quick time tests. Okay. So yeah, that's kind of profile LinkedIn. It's not as intimidating as it sounds. And then I would say, you can actually click on people like to, like what's it called? Like click to connect and stuff like that. So you can actually go to someone and then like click to say, oh, like add a connection and stuff like that. So you can talk to people. Like if you already know the person, you can probably just add a connect and people will just accept that. So yeah, cool. Any questions about that? And that's usually the thing that's probably most intimidating for people if you haven't seen LinkedIn before. All right. Last thing, it's very short, which makes this look like this is very like, oh, last thing's resume. But one thing I want to emphasize at the end here is that, like, first of all, there's so many different ways to write resumes. I've literally gotten so much different advice from different people that are conflicting with each other. You should have an objective statement. You shouldn't have an objective statement. It should be 2 pages. No, it should only be a page. Oh, it's a page plus 5 years of experience, but only if it's relevant to, like, there's so many different things people will tell you about your resume. The important part is to know is that your resume does not get you a job. Your resume gets you your interview, basically to talk to someone. That doesn't get you the job. What gets you the job is actually talking to people. So it's really like, I say, like, it's the first hurdle. It's the first thing that basically, like, when you give your resume, it's like, can someone approve your thing to, like, and they're not even going to look in detail. They're going to very quickly look at it. You might have links to projects. You might have links even to your LinkedIn and stuff like that. But like most likely someone's going to look at your resume very quickly, maybe at the highest 5 minutes. That's being really generous. Like most times like a minute from a recruiter. And they're going to decide, should this person be interviewed now at some level? And that's really what you think is your first hurdle. And that's why that connection, that networking, talking to someone first is usually a better option than just like applying a resume, because the ultimate goal is to talk to someone. So if you can basically get to the point like you can talk to someone first without even giving a resume, that's already going to be a plus for you. In fact, a lot of times, like talking to people internally, and I know how we work internally and stuff like this, and every job I've had, is that if someone internally can like say vouch for that person, refer that person, or like say, hey, like you should check out this person, like they'll look at the resume just to make sure like it fits decently. But usually it's like, yeah, okay, yeah, we'll talk to them. Like there's not even a question, like we'll go interview them, because that person's vouching for them. So you can kind of pass this hurdle without being like basically competing with other people's resumes, which I will tell you, I've literally heard this. I'm almost scared to like tell people this because I don't want to discourage people. But like I've literally heard from a few recruiters in the past that like when you can apply for jobs on LinkedIn, they don't even look at those applications, which I thought was crazy still. I don't know if that's true for everyone, but I've heard it more than once, which I think is just insane still. But the important part is that like there's sometimes so many people applying, they just can't look through all the resumes at once. So if you can reach out to someone first, that's going to be your biggest goal. Um, so yeah, that's kind of wraps up a little bit of motivation of why kind of building up your brand, networking out and stuff like this. And networking really, it's again, making a human connection. So yeah, that's all I had planned. I think I stayed about 30 minutes, less than 45. But does anyone have any questions? No, pretty good. Okay, all right, I'll stop the recording here.